Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mental Health Warriors. I'm your host for this evening, Caroline Murphy Bennis. I'm the Rainbow Warrior, and have a wonderful guest this evening called Brian Barnes, and he'll be back to talk to us after our new intro that we launched today in our branding that I was delighted to help the Mental Health Warriors with today through Flourish by Design. So I hope you enjoy it, guys. See you in 30 seconds. Hi again. Welcome back. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi. Well, Brian, this is a really good friend of mine, guys. Brian Barnes from Brian Barnes Wellbeing. He works in wellness and mental health here in Ireland. And he helps so many people in many different areas. He's got a huge array of skills that he helps people to kind of come back from their mental health issues. So Brian, I'd love you to introduce yourself to the audience, and thanks so much for taking the time out to come and tell your story here this evening. So if you could just introduce yourself and tell us what kind of inspired you to kind of go into the area of mental health.
Okay, well, that's a good question. Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for asking me on. I'm delighted to be here, and especially on International Men's Health Day. As you said, my name is Brian Barnes, and I suppose I have a huge passion for health and well-being, for my health and well-being, and trying to share what I've learned with everyone else as well. I've got, I've worked for almost 30 years in healthcare. I've got a degree in health services management. I'm a general nurse, mental health nurse. I work with people using clinical hypnotherapy, life and business coaching. I'm a mindfulness teacher, and I work with companies and employees doing workshops on stress reduction, mental health awareness, well-being, building your resilience. And yeah, I just have a huge passion for health and well-being, and just sharing, I suppose, kind of tools that I've built up in my own toolkit over the years. And I suppose how I got into health and well-being, it's kind of in the family. My grandfather was a psychiatric nurse, and his mother was a psychiatric nurse. So like, it's definitely been in the family. And I just always had a big curiosity around, psychology and how people think. And, as a kid, like, I loved being out and about and kind of, out in nature. And I always had the big love for fruit and vegetables. Like, I was always, kind of big fan of salads and fruit and vegetables, which is kind of unusual for a kid. And like, I'm vegetarian now, so that was always there, that kind of sense of eating kind of well, eating healthily. So yeah, I suppose I've built this toolkit, and kind of predominantly for myself, and my passion now is around kind of sharing that with people. And I suppose kind of sharing with people that self-care comes from the inside out. And when people kind of look after themselves and look after their own self-care, there's a huge ripple effect out into their community, their family, community, society, and out to the world. So I suppose, it's just part of getting that kind of sense of self-care, and people kind of being their own best friend and getting that out to the world.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, you really are, kind of so passionate about it. And Brian, it's funny that you talked about the fact that it's International Men's Day, because Adam, he's saying hello to you there, Adam Deval, and Kerry Deval, they're both saying hello and welcome to the Mental Health Warriors in the
Thanks,
comments.
guys.
And Adam had a panel discussion this morning, especially for International Men's Day, and he was talking about he mentioned himself, because he's so interested in mental health now, and starting to educate, and so is Kerry, and talking about the legacy that maybe that kind of might be passed on to generation. And it's funny, I was thinking about us that, you know, your grandfather and my father were both psychiatric nurses in the same hospital. And that actually, you know, when he was mentioned that, I thought of like, we're actually carrying on the legacy of them. So it is kind of nearly, you know, it kind of runs like a vein through people's lives, I think, even though I didn't study it like yourself, but I always had that passion for and compassion really for people around suicide, especially because it's something that really kind of breaks my heart. I just find that very, very difficult to see people struggling so much with their mental health. And would you think that, you know, the fact that your grandfather was, you know, involved with mental health, did that kind of inspire you, you know, initially as a child, or when did you start to kind of get interested in you know, that area, I will say?
Yeah, well, I suppose my granddad, who was a hugely positive influence on me, he was a mental health nurse, I suppose psychiatric nurse, mental health nurse back in the 50s. And he was always very compassionate. Like I knew, like, you know, he's dead now, but he was always very compassionate, very kind. And he was ahead of his time because he brought kind of patients out and about, out to the beach and out to matches, GAA matches, and out to, you know, kind of, you know, like let's say concerts and stuff like that. At a time in the 50s when patients were very much kind of behind closed doors. And he used to put on, he used to do a lot of amateur drama. So he won All Ireland awards for amateur drama, and he used to put on shows in the hospital and include the patients, and like, you know, again, which wasn't done at the time. And he was also, he had studied horticulture up in Meath, so there was a working farm in the hospital where he worked in, and your dad worked in,
Yeah.
St. Simon's, and he used to very, like, he played a big part in that, in growing fruit and growing vegetables, and just kind of, you know, like, let's say, I suppose what we know now as the recovery model, which
Yeah.
is that each person is on their own journey through their mental, you know, mental illness, and that they're the expert by their own experience. But, like, you know, what we call it now, it's psychosocial interventions and therapeutic interventions, which is like, you know, moving away from medications and, let's say, moving towards people kind of, you know, just doing things that they love, and, you know, kind of following their passions, and let's say it's called RAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan. So taking kind of positive steps towards recovery, and not just kind of taking medications and being kind of labeled a psychiatric patient. So he was way ahead of his time. And I know, just from seeing how he lived, like, you know, he was doing amateur drama, he was into fishing, he used to play tug of war, he used to play hurling, he used to grow his own vegetables in his own home, in his own garden, like carrots and peas and black currants and onions and potatoes, asparagus, gooseberries, like raspberries. So again, I was getting just he was a huge inspiration on me, both from a mental health point of view and just about a kind of self-care, that, like, you know, just having passions, eating really well. Like, we were brought up on all his organic vegetables, so
Wow.
that's probably how I got a taste of, you know, how you know, like, how good vegetables and fruit are, because I was getting them from straight from the ground, you know,
Yeah.
like, so,
Yeah.
you know, like, again, I can't state enough how much of an influence he was. And I suppose he gave me a big curiosity. We used to talk about philosophy and psychology and, you know, the supernatural and the paranormal and, like, kind of
Yeah.
lots of different things. Like, so, you
Yeah.
know, he was a huge influence on me. His name was Sean Redmond, and he was
Okay.
just an amazing guy. And to this day, like, he's dead about 10 years, unfortunately, but to this day he's been a huge influence on me, both on my career and my outlook on mental health, and, again, kind of focusing on the solutions, because previously, like, you know, and up until recently, it's been the medical model, which is just focusing on the problem, and you're
Yeah.
just giving out medications, antipsychotics, antidepressants, and, you know, kind of like just treating the symptoms. So, like, he gave me a huge wealth of, you know, kind of passion and curiosity around, looking at solutions and
Mm.
kind of, being more kind of proactive. So like he was a huge influence on me.
Yeah, it sounded like he had more of a holistic kind of understanding of, the mental health healing journey, I suppose. He was kind of, because I remember my dad from his day, it was very much the medical, the medical model, as in medication, and I suppose he was probably at the peak of it. And my dad worked in acute, as you call it, acute mental health, where it's like A&E really, so like you're kind of getting people coming in distress, and I suppose at that stage, you really need to kind of start to use some kind of antipsychotic drugs and stuff to calm them down. But like, I suppose now it's trying to prevent that. And so that's where kind of wellness comes in. Would you feel, is, that kind of word and the well-being is so popular now, to kind of getting people to kind of practice their healthy lifestyle, I suppose, to try to prevent. Do you think that tries to prevent, at the onset of a mental illness, or
Absolutely. It's
yeah,
again, yeah, it's kind of prevention rather than cure. And it's prevention. And again, I talk about this, I suppose, on my podcast, and I kind of live it as well, about it's that kind of self-care. And it's about, kind of, let's say, if you imagine building a house, like imagine the stresses and the strains in life is the weather, like you can't stop the weather, you can't stop the storms and the snow and the rain, but you can insulate your house. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah,
you can insulate your house from the inside out by building your resilience and your well-being. And, like we know now, I suppose, that again, as you said, that holistic kind of approach to health, that mind and body is all the same. Do
mm,
you know what I mean? Like, and maybe even up until about 20 years ago, I started nursing in 1993, which is nearly 30 years ago. And it was very much, physical health is the neck down and mental health is the neck up.
yeah.
And thankfully that has changed, that there's a more holistic approach. So, that holistic approach to well-being and, yeah, to prevention rather than cure. And that's really the way forward.
Yeah, and Adam here has a question for you, Brian. He says, "I have a question for Brian. What does mental health trigger look like from your perspective, and what steps do you take into turning it into an opportunity rather than a mistake?" So, how do you look at a mental health trigger, and what steps would you take to turning it into an opportunity rather than a mistake?
I suppose in my experience in my own life, and I work in mental health, in acute mental health, which is A&E for mental health, it's usually a stress. It's usually, let's say, something that comes along in life and it creates stress. And, like, again, if you haven't built up your resilience and your well-being, that can kind of throw you off. It can throw you off course. And I suppose, like to look at that, it's like, again, building your resilience and your well-being through self-care makes you more kind of steady on your course. But
Yeah,
also, like, let's say if a stress comes up in life, it's all about perspective. It's about, okay, can I take a lesson from this? Because
yeah,
I saw a quote earlier on, it's not the load in life, it's how you carry it.
yeah,
So again, kind of, like triggers are different because what might trigger me might not trigger Adam.
yes,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And what might trigger Adam might not trigger me.
yeah,
So we're all different. So there's different triggers for different people. There's different, like what causes one person stress won't cause another person stress. So I
yeah,
suppose it's just kind of knowing yourself and really knowing your own triggers. And that's where I mentioned the RAP. It's Wellness Recovery Action Plan, and that's been a big let's say kind of that's been a big improvement for people's recovery journey, which is to have that wellness recovery action plan. And we use decider skills, which looks at your triggers. So it's kind
okay,
of that radical acceptance of saying, right, this is a trigger for me. Maybe like let's say maybe for some people not getting a good night's sleep is okay, like we'll all feel tired after not getting a good night's sleep, but like that could trigger one person a lot more than the other person. So it's like, okay, I know that if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm going to feel tired and stressed, and it
Mm-hmm.
may affect my mental health. So it's kind of realizing your triggers and pretty much, accepting them, kind of that radical acceptance, accepting
Mm-hmm.
them, embracing them, and knowing that when a trigger comes up, that you're going to be prepared to, to look at it and again to kind of to accept that that's a trigger for you, and then to go into your self-care, that kind of self-care toolkit that I talk about, which
Mm-hmm.
is, like looking after your mental health, exercise, diet, your attitude, love, like doing what you love with people that you love, sleep hygiene. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's kind of, it's acknowledging your triggers, accepting your triggers, and I suppose really kind of embracing them, and kind of like, let's say, being very intimate with them and knowing what they are, and then that gives you the the insight to know how to kind of how to deal with them when they come up and how to bounce back.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And I actually, it's funny how, I know you're also interested in spirituality, the same as myself, and that is part of your perspective on life, as well as being a mental health nurse, and also a wellness practitioner of yourself. And what would you think that, or how does that integrate into your understanding of mental health? What does the spirituality add to it? Does it, do you find it is something that helps you with your mental health as well, or do you think it's just the curiosity, like you said your grandfather had as well, to kind of looking into the deeper meaning of life? Where do you think that fits in?
I think I suppose spirituality is a big part of everything that I do. And I suppose it helps me to look at the bigger picture, because again, like we all have stresses, we all have strains in life, we all have kind of triggers, and we all kind of slip on a banana skin every now and again. And what I've learned, my bringing my spirituality into the lessons that I've learned, is that and I suppose when you hear it and you're having a crap time, you kind of go, okay, but like things happen for a reason, and
Mm-hmm.
like again, I really truly believe that. And I've had like, let's say, difficult times in my life. Like, I separated 3 years ago, and I've had a difficult time, over the last 3 years, just kind of readjusting to that. Um, so I suppose what my spirituality has kind of helped me see is that, like it happened for a reason, and to really kind of take the lesson from what happens in your life. And, I think, now again, spirituality isn't for everybody. So, I'm not going to kind of, like, and people have their own versions of spirituality. So, like, they have their own kind of take on things. But for me, spirituality allows me to kind of see the bigger picture, and it gives me that kind of space between what happens. Let's say, like, let's say, kind of rather than just reacting to something, it helps me to respond to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like when I talk about spirituality, I talk about looking at the bigger picture. I have a huge passion about learning about Buddhism and mindfulness and meditation, and let's say a lot of our Celtic spirituality, which we've talked about before, which is about being back in nature, and how nature can help us, like be more kind of present and have more well-being. So that kind of almost symbiotic relationship with nature.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely helps me look at the bigger picture, and to see that really, I suppose, what I've learned from Buddhism is that kind of sense of compassion, that compassion for me, self-compassion, and compassion for other people, that we're all in the same kind of boat, we're all on a roller coaster, and to be kind of, to have that kindness for yourself and other people. And again, going back into that kind of self-care, well-being, just to see that we're all, you know, we have the same struggles, we have the same stresses in life. And I suppose, even just one person in a family or one person in a community, if they're looking after the well-being, that ripples out, and that ripple effect ripples out to the family, to the community. So yeah, just to just to see that, like, look at the bigger picture, and we're all in this together. We all have different stresses in life, but as much as possible to connect and to kind of help each other do it together.
Yeah. Brilliant. It's amazing. And Adam is actually saying here, he says, while I listen, I'm currently studying my mental health level 3. So he's actually, because Adam is is studying as well. So he's very interested in your journey, because, you're being a mental health nurse. But, this podcast is focusing, really, the theme is focusing on words as medicine. So I know you are also trained in hypnotherapy, and, to ask you the question, how do you find words helpful as a medicine, and like how you speak to people and the words you use, and for yourself, your own talk within your mind, and how you speak to other people, do you find it is a medicine, words?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, it's all down to the power of words, and words are very powerful. Like, that's it in nursing. Like, for years we were taught to say to people, or like, if you were giving someone an injection, and you're kind of saying, like, this is going to pinch, this is going to hurt a little bit, and of course, straight away they're expecting it to hurt. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I even went like,
yeah. And like, and again, you hear, I still hear it now, like, different colleagues, oh, this is going to hurt, like, oh, you're not going to like me after I do this, it's going to hurt you. And you're like, so like, I suppose the best way when I give someone an injection is to say, look, like, this is just going to be a little scratch, or this is just, just going to take a second, just look out the window there, so like, to kind of, to change your focus. So words are hugely powerful. And in hypnotherapy, I suppose it's all about words, because really hypnotherapy it's like meditation with a goal. So you're kind of guiding the person through a meditation with a goal, and like, you're using words that connect with that person, with what they want. So let's say if I'm talking to someone about let's say being a non-smoker, and we talk, like, I'll say to them about, let's say giving up smoking, and I'll say, look, like, you're not giving up anything. Like, because like, as soon as you hear about giving up something, there's a loss, there's a kind of, there's almost a need, a panic. It's like, oh my God, I'm giving up smoking. So it's like, you're not giving up smoking, you're gaining your health. You're gaining extra money, you're gaining, like, probably 20, 30 years onto your life. So again, it's so subtle, but like, just to kind of have a different kind of perspective. And that's created by words that we use. Do you know what I mean? So, again, words are really powerful. And as you mentioned there about the self-talk, like, I talk to people about self-talk. Like, we all have 60,000 thoughts a day. All right. So like, that's, pretty much a thought every second. And our self-talk is that conversation we have with ourselves every day. Every second we have a thought every day, a thought every second. And if those thoughts are, if we're not in the present moment, there's a 70% chance that those thoughts can be negative. So, it can be worried about the future, depressed about the past. So the words that we say to ourselves are hugely important. And that kind of self-talk, which can, a lot of people get stuck in that self-talk and that rumination. And, like, I talk to people about, kind of like, just kind of changing that self-talk to being positive, like, kind of affirmations to, like, I mentioned it to you before about that ABC, to start off with, A, I am amazing. B, I am brave. C, I am caring. D, I am dynamic. And like, our brains aren't wired to do that, because of negative bias, because we're focused on the negative. Because the caveman, when he was out and he saw a bush full of berries, if there was 100 berries and there was one poisonous berry, he was focused on the one poisonous berry because that could kill him. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
exactly. Yeah.
that's where our negative bias comes from. So for us, again, to kind of almost do a reset. Now, I do this with my kids, I do it with clients, I do it with patients, about that kind of self-talk, about making it positive. And again, doing that ABC, I am amazing, I am brave, I am whatever, courageous, I am dynamic, and doing that as much as possible. So words really are powerful, and if we choose positive words, because we choose our thoughts, that's the beauty of having our prefrontal cortex. We choose our thoughts, and if we choose positive thoughts, positive words, again, that ripples out into our whole lives.
Yeah, and I love, Brian, all the beautiful pictures that you have behind you, all the drawings there, the rainbows and the love hearts and everything like that, the kids' drawings, because just as you talk about the words there, like I always say, especially with kids, that, the words that the adult uses to the child is painting a picture in their mind, like the backdrop, like it can be a beautiful picture with rainbows and love hearts, and, it paints that kind of self-image that they will have going forward in their life. So like I have this kind of passion around that, your tone of voice and the words that you use and how you frame it. Like you said, like it's about framing a situation as well, isn't it? Like how, like you said, how this is going to hurt, or this is, rather than saying, oh, it's going to be fine, it'll be over in a second, or just look out there. And there is if you can become conscious of the fact that words are medicinal, that they can have a very soothing effect on you, that, you kind of retrain yourself out of those automatic ways of speaking. Because like we do have, I love the idea of kind of all of us together in these conversations, trying to kind of redesign a more conscious way of communicating that is more kind of, like positive, and like the fine art of communication. If we're really conscious of like the tone of voice, what we're saying, what we're painting in somebody else's mind about themselves, because a lot of the work that we have to do is undoing that, isn't it? And it's like, trying to use practices to kind of defend ourselves from those kind of those horrible things that people can say without, just that they're unconscious of the power of words as such. So I love that. I
Absolutely.
love that.
Well, I'll give you another example. I have
Yeah,
three kids. They're 12, 10, and 7, and they do this amazing artwork. Like, they're brilliant.
yeah, it's
But anyway,
gorgeous.
I learned this a few years ago. Again, because I've always been fascinated by psychology and let's say words and just, yeah, I suppose child psychology, which I studied a lot when I started to have kids, because we had three kids under 4. So we had three kids under 4, and
Yeah.
I remember like reading an article about how you speak to kids, and you imagine if you've got two kids and you give each one a glass of milk, all right, and you're at the fridge and you give each one a glass of milk and it's kind of full up to the top, and they're walking over to the table, and you say to the first kid, you say, "Don't spill that milk." What are you
All
doing?
over. Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? You're going to you're straight away you're looking at the negative.
yeah,
You're planting a seed in their mind. They're going to be like, all they can, because to not spill the milk, they have to imagine spilling the milk
yes,
first.
yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? So you
yeah,
say, "Don't
yeah,
spill that milk." Right. To the second kid, you say, "Just be careful with that."
yeah,
Now it's the
yeah,
same
yeah, yeah,
intention.
yeah,
You're looking for the same result,
yeah,
but each kid is getting a very different message. The first one is, "Don't spill that milk." It's like, they have to think about spilling the milk to not spill the milk,
yeah, yeah,
and also you're kind of planting that seed, and you're making them kind of anxious. It's like, "Oh
yeah,
God, if I don't," like, second kid is like, "Just be careful with that." Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Same
It's
intention,
totally
same,
different. Yeah.
yeah.
Because it's laying the seeds of anxiety, like, isn't it? Because if you're constantly listening to that all the time, you're going to be anxious of even trying anything new as well. You're not going to be kind of open to it, because you're going to laying the seeds of, I suppose, restricting your creativity as well, because you're thinking, oh, I won't try that in case I make a mistake. and that it's wrong to make mistakes. I can't make a mistake, that kind of way. So it's so powerful, isn't it? That those kind of those little seeds that you're planting all the time, like, for yourself. And is there
words,
anything? Yeah.
the words are so powerful. And I'll give you another example. If you imagine, just close your eyes for a sec. Just close your eyes. And just imagine now being in your kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk up to the fridge.
Mm-hmm.
And you open the door. And you take out a lemon. And it's a really bright yellow lemon, lovely, ripe, juicy lemon. And you take it out and you put it on the chopping board. And you get a knife and you cut it in half. And then you take one half and you cut that in half, so you've got 2/4 of lemon. And just pick up a quarter of lemon and just put it into your mouth. And just take a big bite out of it. And you can feel that lemon, you can feel the lemon juice in your mouth. And what's in your mouth?
Lemon juice, it's fresh.
And you can feel, you can taste that in your mouth, can't you?
Taste
You can
it,
literally taste it in your mouth.
Yeah. You start to salivate.
You start to salivate. Your mouth starts to water. Now you haven't gone to the fridge. You haven't put a lemon in your mouth. I've just kind of told you to imagine doing that. So words create images. Images create emotions. Emotions create results in your body. So words are hugely powerful.
Yeah, it's a power of suggestion as well, isn't it? And like that same in branding. And that's what I'm really passionate about, the conscious branding, because like all the messaging that we get all the time, kind of manipulating the mind in a negative way, to buy certain things that we need and making us feel bad about our bodies, making feel, and like, kind of reinforcing these stereotypes and stuff like that, and it's so, like, when you start thinking about the power of words, like there's so much there that I suppose, you could either feed into, or you can kind of start to become conscious of and not let it, affect you as much, But you have amazing voice, Brian. You have amazing
But also,
voice.
Caroline, I suppose it's to recognize and to accept the power of words and use them as a positive.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so, and like that, it's like, right, don't spill the milk. Be careful with that. Yeah. Again, it's the same message, it's the same intention, but just different words.
Yeah, exactly. So, when you flood yourself with those, positive messaging, and like, is there anything that you use yourself? Like, I know you're brilliant with all these quotes in your podcasts. You're like I don't know how you hold on to so many of them, but do you have any kind of mantras or things that you say to yourself that kind of you find keeps you positive and keeps your mind in a kind of a positive state of mind?
I suppose I will often run through that ABC, like I'll say, I am amazing, I am brave, I am calm, I have, like, so like and almost like a mantra. A mantra is something positive that you say to yourself in the present. So, and look at, like, there can be different, again, that's why that ABC is brilliant, because everyone will have a different words, because I might say I am, brave, and that mightn't sit well with someone else. They might say I am beautiful, or I am brilliant, or so again, I think it's good that people can, with that ABC, people can personalize their own affirmations. That's the beauty of that. And the more often you do it, because like, like, it's like me saying, okay, like, let's say exercise, I swim in the sea and I go hiking and cycling. Now, other people like going to the gym. I hate the gym. So again, it's like, like, it's not to prescribe to someone, but like that ABC of self-talk really allows people to personalize it. And, if you're picking the words yourself, they go in a lot quicker and they have a lot more influence.
Yeah, and sometimes you need different words, don't you? You might be struggling with a different area, that you might need kind of, like I say, being your own cheerleader. You need cheerleading in a certain aspect of your life, and that can change, you know, from day to day, week to week, you know, can't it? So I like that idea of the, like your on your website, you talk about the unique well-being solutions, I suppose, because every person is unique, and then, you know, everybody needs a unique set of tools to, you know, help them with their wellness at different stages in life as well, I guess. Like, and like you said, you know, you had your separation, you might needed a different kind of toolkit at that stage, and you know, then maybe
Yeah.
somebody who is trying to, like, I know when you're trying to kind of push yourself to do things that you haven't done before, you need a different set of tools, you know, and you know, that kind of that mentorship is important as well, like, isn't it? You know, the kind of friends that are kind of supporting you with those positive words, you know, that kind of help you to kind of keep that momentum going, you know, so that you're not just always taking in everything from the noise of life, that you have those that community around you that's kind of reinforcing those affirmations that you're saying to yourself, you know. Do you feel
Absolutely,
that?
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
And again, with that ABC, you know, even better that you're picking the word for yourself, and it could be different tomorrow, it could be different the next day. Like, again, like I separated 3 years ago, and it's been quite the journey. And I know this stuff works because I've used it on myself. Like anything that is in my toolkit that I share with people, I know it works. And again, you know, it's like that positive self-talk is gold dusts. You know, it really is, because again, like, and you know, like I talk to people about being mindful and being in the moment. And if we're not in the moment, you know, there's a 70% chance of having a negative thought. So there's a 70% chance of being anxious about the future or depressed about the past. And again, that comes from that kind of negative bias. So yeah, it's really powerful and it works.
yeah. And you know, the fact that this is, you know, anti-bullying week as well, is there anything that you would advise, you know, young, you know, kids or anyone even in the workplace to deal with bullying when it comes to mental wellness? Is, you know, if you have any guidance on that, or
Well, actually, I tuned in to Adam. He had a lovely little video earlier on about bullying, and I thought it was beautiful. It was only for a couple of minutes, and he talked about, and it really hit home with me because again, I've got kids, you know, and like the whole bullying in schools and stuff. And I suppose I've been bullied throughout my life at different times, you know, so I know what it feels like, and I could agree with Adam, like just kind of, you know, don't do something about it. He was saying like take action. You know, I
yeah,
suppose if you know, like silence is acceptance, you know.
yeah,
There's a quote, it's like, you know, the worst thing about bad things happening in the world is for good people to do nothing, you know.
yes, yeah,
So, you know, just to kind of have, again, you know, to be brave and to have the courage to do something about it. Do you know what I mean? Because the person that's being bullied obviously maybe, you know, isn't in a place to do anything about it, and they might be a bit vulnerable. The person that's bullying, and as Adam pointed out earlier on, you know, they have more than likely been bullied themselves.
yeah,
So, you know, and you could kind of take all that apart, but I think, you know, in the time that it's happening, just to kind of maybe step in and say, look, guys, you know, there's no need for that, or, you know, just to be kind of more proactive and just to do something about it. Because again, silence is acceptance. So, and I think it's just to have this, for me, you know, like to have a zero tolerance
yeah,
around bullying. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Really, that's the most important thing. And, you know, to be aware that it happens. And if you see it happening, if you know that's happening, to kind of step in and
yeah.
do the right thing. Do the right thing.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And that's what I was saying about the hand. I thought it was great, you know, the logo with the hand like that, because it's setting that boundary and just saying no, you know, stop. Because I think you know, I found for myself, I was talking about in the latest interview, I think it was last night actually, yeah, with the Warriors of Attraction, that, you know, there's sometimes in your life you're more vulnerable to not being able to do that, you know. So like at one point when I was a child, I remember there was a bully in our classroom, and I was able to not only step up for myself but for the other people around me, you know. I straight away was able to go in and say no, that's not on. And then but then when my parents broke up when I was in college, I remember when I came back after Christmas, I was very vulnerable. I was like, actually, Adam had mentioned that the crack, like I thought was great analogy, talked about breaking a glass, and that from the outside it looks fine, but from the inside it was kind of broken into pieces as such, and so you're vulnerable. That kind of protection around you has cracks in it. And I know we shared a visual one time about the cracked bowl, that bowl that was cracked, and then but it takes a while to put the pieces back together, and then it gets stronger after the fact when you've healed yourself. But in that period when you're vulnerable, it's very hard to maybe do that. So I think it's a brilliant point for people around you when you see somebody who is in that vulnerable position, and there are people picking on to step up and to be that voice for the vulnerable in society, I suppose, or anyone in your, whether it's a child or an adult, because we all go through those dips that we don't have the confidence to be able to do that. It's really important, isn't it? Because if you know what that feels like, and I think the more that really is when people's mental health could really dip, because if you're already broken and then somebody, kind of picks up on that and starts to, push you further down, and you don't have that support network around you, it's very hard it's a long way down, and it's further to kind of get back up again, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And again, I'd say to anyone, and I say it to my kids, it's like, like step in and do something. I say to my kids, tell an adult, tell your teacher, like I suppose for adults, like, step in, silence is acceptance, and, zero tolerance, and kind of step in and do the right thing.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. I'm guessing there's a couple of questions in for you. So there's another question. As a mental health nurse, why do you think there is a massive stigma surrounding patients seeking support from the NHS? Well, that's in Britain. So, I think why is there a massive stigma around seeking support for mental health?
I think there's this thing, because I think people see it as maybe, like, again, I suppose, kind of a sign of weakness that they're having to go and kind of be open and to talk about, how they're feeling. And it's just, it's almost, we've inherited that from very recent times when it wasn't talked about, and and again, I have a degree in health services management. I've studied health services around the world. Like it was institutionalized, like where your dad worked and my grandfather worked, and I know they were in the UK as well. There were big asylums and, kind of like big mental health hospitals. They were called asylums, or, just big mental health hospitals. And they were always kind of up on the hill, or, out of town. And it was trying to it was always trying to be hidden. You know what I mean? Now, look, we know that if you kind of sweep enough dust under the carpet, you'll have a big pile of dust building up. So I think that's what happened. And, like, again, we've turned a corner with, again, talking about mental health and reducing the stigma. And, so it's very much something that we've inherited from previous generations.
Yeah.
But again, it's like the bullying, zero tolerance to stigma. It's up to us, literally here and now. Like we are, like anyone that's alive today is at the very crest of humanity. Do you know what I mean? Everyone else is dead. So we can talk about previous generations and like I talked about my grandfather, like, like let's say we can talk about the good that came from them, and to say, right, okay, we've inherited this kind of stigma about mental health. It's bullshit and it's not good enough and it doesn't serve us. And it's time to really take a start look at a zero tolerance to bullying and a zero tolerance to stigma around mental health. And,
Brilliant,
to talk about it and to know that looking for help is a sign of strength.
Excellent. That's amazing. That's a brilliant, really strong message. It's like, fantastic. And actually, Kerry says, I think Brian is hinting he wants to do a show with Adam at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd get on great, the two of you. Actually, you'd probably give him some great
I think so too.
guidelines, because he's interested in studying in that area as well. So you might be a good mentor for him.
Exactly.
in,
And I
in his,
know I can learn because, again, I
yeah,
mentioned, like, I've been watching Adam the last couple of months, and I know I can learn a lot from him too. We can all learn from each other. But again, I think,
exactly.
like, the whole kind of message is, really kind of, zero tolerance to stigma, and just talk about it. Like I'm very open about the fact that I've had roller coasters in my life, mental health roller coasters. Like I've been going for counseling for the last 4 years. And, it's been one of the best things that I could have done. Like I've gone for coaching and, energy healing and Reiki and kinesiology and massages and stuff like that, and all my own self-care. But like to have gone for coaching for the last 4 years has really kept me, on the path that I wanted to be on through, it's helped me walk steady on unsteady ground.
Yeah,
And I've walked on very unsteady ground over the last three
yeah,
years, as you know.
yeah, yes,
And, again, everything, the whole toolkit that I have for myself and I share with people, but like, yeah, counseling, talk to people,
mhm,
whether it's a friend or a colleague or a counselor, mental health professional. But, just to, again, it's up to us to get this out of the open and to have a culture of, just being open and honest and having zero tolerance around any kind of stigma around mental health. Enough is enough.
yeah. And it's funny how actually I'm thinking of what the fantastic things that can come out of like even people getting to rock bottom, because the only way is up. And like I was thinking about most of the friends that I have that are in wellness or in any kind of the healing arts, we'll say, they all seem to have had really difficult times and they've really struggled, and they've kind of found a way out of that, and then got themselves well and turned around and started healing others, and become kind of champions for what they love, and found their purpose through it as such, that kind of way. So it's amazing how, like, I think sometimes when you look at people and you think that, like yourself even, that you're so well qualified in, in mental health and in all the different kind of the toolkit, as you say, you have, that you think that you're immune to anything. But you've had dips in your own journey, and that's the reason why you're here talking to
Absolutely.
us. Yeah,
I've had a lot of dips in my journey. I've had a lot of dips, and like you mentioned suicide earlier on. Like I attempted suicide when I was 30. Like I'm 46 now, but like 16 years ago, I attempted suicide, and so I am, I'm talking from experience when I talk
yeah,
about this stuff,
yeah,
and I know what it feels like to be depressed. I know what it feels like to want to kind of end the pain. I've been down that road, and I suppose that's given me the insight into like how to build up that toolkit, because like I know it works, so that gives me the insight to know that like how bad it can get and how good it can get.
yeah,
Because look, I know myself, I know about stigma. Like I work in mental health, and there can be even a stigma with the mental health professionals. Like,
mm,
it's almost a kind of, like there can be kind of a them and us. And again, we've inherited that. We
yeah,
have inherited that from previous generations. But again, it's time to kind of, just kind of end that stigma. And again, the only way to do that is to have a zero tolerance against stigma, and just to have a completely open conversation about how we're feeling. It's okay not to be okay. And, like just to a problem shared is a problem halved. And just to talk about it, just to blow off all that dust that we've been
yeah.
sweeping under the carpet, and just kind of start from a fresh start.
Yeah, and it goes to show like how much of that kind of dust is there, because I know we're both just joined the Campfire Project as well, and I know they're doing fantastic work there for in the men's group, and being an International Men's Day today. There are unique kind of challenges for men as well, aren't there? And I suppose like uh, I think. I found it really interesting listening into their kind of their conversations. And even during the week, they had a special one for this week, for the International Men's Day. And it was just amazing to watch them trying to work out and express their feelings, you know, because like that, you know, in society, like, men haven't had that opportunity to have that kind of safe space to talk openly about their emotions as such. So it's so alien to them. And sometimes, you know, like, we don't realize, the women don't realize the struggles and the unique challenges that men have around mental health and what's going on in their minds, you know. And sometimes, you know, I just think that it's a beautiful time for the flowering of that understanding between the sexes, like, you know, to understand, like, what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, what the women want, what the men want, and how does that affect our mental health. And again, like, the fine art of communication and words, and how can we kind of find a new way of talking to each other, that builds more harmonious relationships, that isn't built on the kind of patterns of the past and the patterns of, you know, maybe what your parents, what you're born into, you know. It's amazing time really for our children to kind of watch us trying to unpack that, you know, because this is it's a time, like, for people who are interested in doing that. Like, it's a really kind of amazing kind of creative process that is trying to flower, like, at the moment, isn't it? You know, how do you feel
It's
about that,
exciting.
Ryan?
I suppose it's exciting because it's like, you know, again, looking back on what we've inherited from previous generations, which is kind of the stigma around mental health, and, you know, being closed-minded, and, you know, boys don't cry, men don't cry, like, you know, kind of like, just to kind of have a, you know, like, kind of toughen up and kind of get on with things. And again, do we look at the problem or do we look at the solution? Now, I'm very solution focused,
Yeah.
in everything that I do. So we can look at the problem, and obviously to accept the problem and go, look, we've inherited a lot of this stuff. Anyone that we've inherited it from are dead.
Yes.
So it's like, we need to get busy. We need to get busy kind of creating a whole new kind of perspective and a whole new kind of direction with bullying, with mental health, with kind of, as you said, how men and women talk to each other, how well we kind of, you know, understand each other. So it's so exciting. So, okay, we can look at the problems and say, right, we've inherited this kind of way of thinking about mental health, and these guys didn't know better. You know, like, we're at the cutting edge of humanity, and we need to look at the solutions. What are the solutions? You know, zero tolerance to bullying, zero tolerance to stigma, being proactive, being courageous, being brave, having open communications, talking about how we feel, and, you know, just being open and honest with each other.
Yeah, it's amazing, because it's like we have to look into the darkness to be able to move forward as humanity. Because, like, I know we both are on the same page about that, like, you know, the raising of our consciousness, you know, and, like, really, we can't move forward as a human race until we kind of do this work. You know, this is the work of our time, like the relationship, you know, that the holy relationship, as I call it in one of my poems. Like, you know, it's the kind of communication between each person, that sacred relationship, and that what can kind of come out of that listening, that deep listening, and the openness to hear the other person without your own ego, you know, without your own veil, you know, the perception that you're seeing through or you're listening through. You know, how can you try to cultivate that clear communication with the other person, you know?
Yeah. And look, and again, going back to words, Caroline, like, you know, we can either curse the darkness or light a candle.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And going back to our children, we can either say, don't spill that, or we can say, be careful.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, the same, you know, again, it's all the kind of, you know, nuances around words. So, yeah, we know that we've inherited a lot of this stuff from previous generations. It's time to kind of, you know, okay, recognize and accept those dark times, you know, and not necessarily curse it, but to accept the darkness and then we go light our candle, and that's
Yeah.
where we shine a light on that zero tolerance around bullying, stigma, kind of, and again, just be more open, be more positive, be more inclusive, and that all starts one conversation at a time, like the ripple effect of this conversation. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly.
It's,
Yeah.
so it's one conversation at a time, and that ripples out. And, that's the beauty of the potential of people being kind of honest and open.
Yeah, it's changing that into a conscious culture, as I keep saying. That conscious. It does. It changes the kind of the status quo. Then because the status quo is starting to influences everything, and everything is connected and interconnected. So the more people that start listening, and it has a kind of a cumulative effect, like, doesn't it? And it's just, I was thinking about just in January, I know you actually had COVID, didn't you? And you were very, very sick, and you were like a month out of work. But then out of that, you started a new podcast series called Mind You, which is an absolute treasure trove of self-help. There's 50 episodes at the moment. You
51,
just did it.
just 51.
51, okay, 51. And out of that sickness, like, yeah, I remember we were talking about, you were going to have the idea of it, and then you were like, thinking about it, and weren't sure, you didn't have time, or whatever, you were so busy, and then you had COVID, and then out of that darkness of COVID and sickness, like, you just got this new kind of lease of life. You started into your podcast, and it was no stopping you. Amazing. For anyone who's
Yeah.
interested in self-care, it's like a little master class on self-care. It's broken into like 3 parts. It was the introduction to the person and the professions from all over the world, and all different types of healing arts, and then how they look after themselves, how they look after others. So it's really broken up into lovely kind of bite-sized pieces for people to kind of get a taste of different therapies and different self-help. It's amazing. So well done on that. That was fantastic body of work that you produced this year. It's really wonderful. And for anyone who would like to get in touch with you, or for your services or anything, Brian, where would you send them to?
The best place to get me is my website. It's brianbarneswellbeing.com. And everything is there. All my kind of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, my podcast. There's a page for my podcasts. So you'll get me at brianbarneswellbeing.com.
Excellent. And the last thing I'm going to ask you is, like, I asked Adam this the last day, what do you think is the most powerful word in the English language?
That's a good question, Adam. Thank you for putting me on the spot here, man. I'll get you back for that. What's the most... I tell you, actually, it's 2 words. And I think the two most powerful words in the world are I am, I think.
Oh, yes.
Because you can, again, that kind of, that can, going back to that ABC and that, kind of like self-talk that we all have. And Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. Yeah. So if you think I am lazy, I am, kind of not good enough, like, you live that. Do you know what I mean? You literally start to live that. You're setting your GPS towards that. Where, again, coming back to the ABCs, I am amazing, I am brilliant, I am caring, I am compassionate, I am, driven, I am energized. And, so I think I am is the most powerful 2 words that you can use that can literally kind of change your life from negative to positive, just by, kind of, let's say, how you use those words. And we can all choose what words, we use. That's the beauty of having, like, let's say, kind of like control over our thoughts and words, that we can choose. Yeah. So it's all down to choice. And like that, the more you do it, the stronger that muscle gets.
Excellent. That's amazing. Thanks so much, Brian, for coming on. You're really another treasure trove show full of all your wisdom and all your toolkit. And I'm sure people will be in touch and definitely check out the Mind You podcast. So I've just a bit of housekeeping to do to say that for anyone who's looking for our TV guide, it's out tomorrow with the full lineup of guests and shows for next week. And we've been absolutely thrilled to have you here for the hour together, and I've loved your company, Brian. Thanks for taking time out from your Friday night to talk to all of us and to our global audience in all different time zones around the world. And it's fantastic to be getting that message out again, and your strong message around the boundaries around the stigma. And I hope you all enjoyed the show and that you like our new branding, because today was our launch day, and we've been working very hard on that together to get it launched today. So we'll see you back here on Monday for our next show, and check out the TV guide for tomorrow, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks for having me, and thanks for watching, guys. Thank you.
See you all. Bye.
Bye.